juta pulinya rewaya. Nyurangare nyakko jipinga mara anang miri walta juta tulinga.
Saturday night, and I had my powder blue ultramarine Volkswagen Combi packed with supplies and all my art equipment and film equipment, and I was just travelling due west into the setting sun. I did take a chance, and I found the community after a 6-hour drive into the night. My dad said, "What's a young man doing in a place like Papunya?" Most people were going to Paris. So when I got to Papunya, I had this in my mind, that I was going to be paid like a millionaire to teach children in rags.
I think Papunya did define all of Geoff's subsequent life. Those 18 months there gave him the roadmap that he travelled on.
For someone like Geoff Bardon, Papunya would have been an absolute ordeal. You know, to be a visionary and to be sympathetic to Aboriginal people at that time, at that place in Australia, was really setting yourself up for a fall.
The thing that he created turned around to bite him. It's strange how that goes.
Every time they were asked to do this pattern on the sand, pattern on the paper, pattern on the blackboard. This must be why they're calling him Mr. Pattern.
This particular painting here, you can just see a little bit of under the wall. That is the beginning of the Papunya Tula artist movement in its modern form. And that painting, sadly, was covered up. But Geoff Bardon, who was a teacher here in 1971, a very sensitive teacher, was the person who began this movement. And he encouraged the old men to paint whatever they desired.
At $440,000, once, twice, third, final call then. Thank you, $440,000.
In my opinion, the work will be worth, millions of dollars in the future. It is a extremely intricate, aesthetically beautiful, cultural masterpiece.
I'd brought up everything in my life. In the toolkit, I had a rabbit trap, spirit level. I was going to build a
trebuie să te
When I met him the day after he arrived, I'd noticed he had a blue combi. And it was full of quite expensive looking audio-visual gear. 16mm camera, the gear that goes with it.
instrucții și au corect merit. Arrows point from the merit panels to the children.
I straight into filming Aboriginal life, and I used to walk around the camps every afternoon and take little cameos of people. I thought everyone was interested in helping the Aboriginals. I thought that was the idea, but I didn't find that the case at all. A lot of people on the outpost thought it was appropriate to despise them, and that the government policy was to destroy them. The traditional people were being annihilated. They were having their culture stamped out, and I was confronted with a community of 1,400 people struggling for survival in disruption and confusion and despair. White people had all the power and all the money and all the possessions and all the control. It was a very wet year in 1971, and I was explaining to the boys and girls that the rain was precipitated by going over mountains, and that caused the change of temperature, which caused the rain to fall, which is what's scientifically truthful. But to the Aboriginal, as I later found out, it's the power of a man's voice. He sings in a cave with a fire at night that induces the rain. So I have an ear for poetry.
Asta de la ce era?
And I sort of thought, now, that's a lovely idea. It's a beautiful idea. It's not rational, but it's a special thought.
He had an innocent delight and love for what he was seeing, and it would be fair to say he loved the people. He came to love them very quickly, and so his love, respect, regard, delight.
Băi, vezi că aici continuă ăsta.
Da, lasă, nu atinge, că îl înregistrez acum.
You didn't associate with Aboriginal people socially, but he found that difficult to maintain because he really liked some of the Aboriginal people that he was working with. And if he wanted to go and associate with them socially, he would be cut off by the white people.
I just know that living at Papunya, there were good and bad white people, and the bad people gave the rest a terrible time.
The chronic problem was that there might have been 1,500 there, but there was nothing to do. They were not allowed to leave, and they were bored. Those men who had jobs in the outpost were either on a hygiene squad with garbage or hosing parks, which didn't really make much sense to traditional people, or sawing wood for the European fires of the winter time, which again was sort of jokey sort of thing.
When I was a little girl, I used to come to school, and I loved coming to school because I wanted to learn.
We'd sit in the sand, and with your knuckles and fingers, you can draw shapes and sizes, and you can make tracks of dogs and kangaroos, emus, birds. So I'd do the same because I was sort of fearless with the young people, and I realised that there was an art style in the sand.
They automatically were doing what Western Desert painters do. Draw lines, dots, tracks, and I guess the original canvas was the sand. The red sand.
I think he brought an absolutely open mind to what he was seeing. That was revelatory for Geoff.
Yeah, I was doing what fellas drawing, just squares and round, diamond, triangle, all that, and he didn't want it. So he said, oh, you got to draw something that's your style, you know. So I drew a kangaroo, first kangaroo was just, he didn't want the first one, so he screwed up and threw it in the bin, drew another one, done another one, so he didn't want that second one, so he done a double kangaroo, and he liked that, so he kept it on the wall.
We used to trace every time he used to sit beside us, and we used to draw it on the paper or blackboard.
I didn't set out to rock any boat, but it just seemed silly to have the young people drawing cowboys and Indians all day when they had an intact culture of their own. Wonderful assistant teacher, translator in Obed Ragged, who would convert all my ideas into Repetitive language, and the children of all age groups from 5 to 16 would hear what Obed would have to say about what I was drawing on the board, and we worked around patterns where I would be called Mr. Patten. Well, once I'd settled into the classroom situation, we would go out for walks and for driving adventures. I ignited curiosity in the children with my car, which was the sort of vehicle no one had ever seen before, with its rear-engine, air-cooled motor. We went driving in the combi with my entire class in the back of the vehicle, Obed in the passenger seat, drive. You know, it was nothing for us to do 100 miles. We would go in the weather like today. We would go driving to the dams or the windmills and have a swim. I got to know the children's names very, very well, as if they were my own family. And this was lovely. I was very happy. And I was no longer lonely with Obed. When old Mick Jackamara and Carper Jemba Jimmer came to my flat one winter night with the little drawing of honey ant mural they wanted to do. It was very exciting, and I did feed the men with my rice rissos.
Geoff related that to the story about how the men came to him and said, you know, could you please help us? We would like to paint our stories. Can you help us with some of the paints and things that, you know, you can give us, and we will show you by painting for you what we know about our dreaming. And I guess in some ways they saw it as wrong that, you know, the children were able to do those sort of things at school, and, you know, they felt that perhaps this was their right.
The honey ant mural was the big event for the traditional community. There was no prompting or persuasion necessary. The people gathered with terrific enthusiasm around the prepared wall up the wall, and the traditional painters just simply by intuition understood these things. At one stage, Carper painted a European ant on the wall. It was a sort of a stick ant, and it wasn't such a good idea. And I said to Carper, is that black fella ant or a white man's ant? And he said, it's one of yours. And of course I said, well, we don't want it. We want a black fella ant. I said, okay. And that's the way the mural finished up. A legitimate Aboriginal cultural icon. A masterpiece in Western Desert art. But it didn't impress anybody particularly except ourselves.
There was this quite bold and unequivocal statement of cultural identity in Papunya, which of course is what everyone up until then had been actively trying to suppress. So that was quite a sensation.
People from all parts of the white community came to the school on these afternoons as the honey ant mural went up on the wall, and everyone was rejoicing that it was such a happy occasion. The men used to walk home through the school grounds after roll call, and the Pintabee men would always sit on the lawn and sing. And there would often be 20 or 30 people singing the mural honey ant song. These men later became visitors to my art room and painted pictures of these greetings. They were kangaroo hunters, village councillors, hygiene squad men, gardeners. They all came from everywhere over the later 9 months to work with me in the art room and elsewhere doing their painting. I was anxious to help them because I was a painter too. I hadn't done much. I'd done a few Hearts Bluff and I loved it. I used to look out of my veranda flat and to see the mist and the weather change and the sunlight change. Happy mood in our painting room. It was a delightful place to work. People worked with zest and confidence. I'd go round and round the group with a translator, speaking favourably of these men or what they were doing, or joking in a happy way. I wasn't in the room, the great painting room, for more than half an hour or an hour the most of the day. I just simply motivate these people with what I knew was encouragement and goodwill. We were starting off at rock bottom with the humblest of materials, and that included floor tiles and tables. We used to saw up tables, anything at all.
Okay.
A lot of the early paintings were made using scrap materials, so there was a lot of building going on in Papunya, and so the artists were picking up scrap bits of skirting board or found sort of materials that were lying around and painting on them using house paints, whatever came to hand. And so I think that really does encapsulate Papunya, the found materials, the scraps, the salvage. People were being treated like the refuse of, society in Papunya, and that's what the artists used to make these wonderful paintings, these wonderful cultural documents.
Paint quality was always doubtful. I would use anything. I even use my shoe polish, white shoe cleaner, when we ran out of white, and painted on floor tiles that were just lying idle where the tilers had left them. The movement just gathered momentum, and it excited the little township of Papunya.
If Geoff had any influence at all on the men, he would say to them, your paintings are your paintings and you must create them in the way that you know how. He was very respectful. He was very, very kind.
Aboriginal art was there a long time before me or Geoff Bardon or the 1970s. The men were painting in the sand, they were painting coolamans, they were painting rocks, they were painting symbols everywhere. Geoff came along and somehow turned on this tap, and out of it came a huge flow of drawings and paintings. And that it looked like these men, all they needed was some sort of impetus and some sort of push for them to extend to another level.
Creative art is actually a search for something out of nothing. And this is the rationale of creativity in its essence, that you actually chase the inspirations of the soul, of the spirit, and be open to new things.
One of the things that Geoff Bardon has written about and talked about was how he was struck by the fact that artists would pick up a paintbrush and just start painting straight away. You know, there wasn't any kind of agonising over what to paint or sketching or thinking about it. It was people were able to translate the designs that they'd been painting on their bodies or making the ground paintings, the sand paintings in the rock shelters and so on. Those designs and those images were able to be translated very easily and immediately onto these newfound supports.
It's more better we do painting on big canvas, because if we do body painting, none is distributed, none is rock print. Even on the sand painting, when we do sand painting, sun is disappeared again, because wind blow and it's destroyed. While on the canvas, it's now for us that we know. It's better to show the world that we're doing the drawing on the canvas, so they can stay on the canvas for years and years.
A beautiful world of poetic intensity was in these men's minds. So I came across this water dreaming, and then this bush tucker dreaming, wild tomato story, travelling story, woman's story, wallaby dreaming. And after a while I began to realise there was a universe being created before my eyes.
The paintings were originally done by finger painting, and this method involves a physical touch, a haptic tactile quality quite separate from visual sensitivity. Realism is restrained to depict another kind of reality, the psychological reality of a man's spiritual relationship to his dreaming.
They could give him the gift of their understanding of country, the gift of their art to him, because he was the one helping them.
When I was at Papunya, I learned about friendship in a mature way of love between men, where I could be respected and give respect and feel confident that I was being received well, and there was a response coming from the Aboriginal men themselves, with Johnny Warrangula and Tim Lura Jabaljari, men of magnificent minds and spirit.
Geoff Bardon's best friend amongst the Aboriginal people was Tim Lura Jabaljari, who was an Amudjara man. And Tim was a very gentle man. He had a very gentle speaking voice, and I think in a way that complemented Geoff's gentle nature. And for whatever reason, they became the best of friends, I would say. And Tim really, really appreciated Geoff.
I remember Geoff saying to me that Tim Lura was like a movie star. He looked like a movie star. He should have been a movie star, in any other context he would have been. And certainly his presence comes out of those images very strongly.
Tim himself was a super fine artist. His earliest works are quite dazzlingly brilliant. And one of the things he did that no one else did for part of that was to give a sense of overlays of paint, so that you'd have a sense of looking through a cloud cover through to the cloud cover again, finer to the ground or something like that, or smoke. He could give an impression of smoke in the sky over the landscape.
Jangali brother and his sister here, and he help Alba. He want to get married with a Chungarai man. You know, to help all his brother. Married to Chungarai. Same old time type and do me, you know, get married and help him. Okay. That's it. Yeah. Married.
Timler was certainly one of those people that really championed Geoff in those early days and introduced his brother, Clifford Possum, of course, to Geoff. And the rest, as they say, is history. In some of the works, for instance, Clifford Possum Jappaljari, they're very complex, if you like, mind maps of his country or some of the stories that he is able to paint. But of course, they're not necessarily accurately topographically represented. They're represented in terms of their cultural significance.
Well, Uda was a character of a man. He had an explosive laughter and never learned any English at all. There was marvellous vitality in Uda's work, and he painted many stories for me, children's stories and grasshopper stories. He was a man that I always remember because of his eccentric ways. When we were doing my filming, he would quickly take over the woomera and the spear and show me how to throw and become very happy to demonstrate and willingly instructed me. And I was always grateful to his good nature. Johnny Warangula was a man of delightful charm, and his compulsion to paint is a classic gift to an artist. He simply painted away his beloved places, Kalipimpimpa and Skuri, and all the dreamings of Tukaja people, the literature that he belonged to.
He could tell these stories. He was very good at acting out stories, and he'd sing the songs at the drop of a hat. He was a great singer of songs of his country, Johnny. And I think Geoff
Uite, vrei
appealed
să-ți
to
dau
his
niște
good
bani?
nature. He had a good nature, good sense of humour. That was Johnny. He could make it come to life in his paintings in a lovely way, and that's why Geoff and he also got on wonderfully well.
He had a very expressive, sort of almost like pointillist style that has come to be, you know, quite identified with his work. The representational images in the work will be overlaid by this skein of overdotting that suggests the vegetation perhaps of the country, you know, the seasonal changes of the landscape or fire going through the country. And so it's a very beautiful effect and very evocative of a changing landscape, but it also does, for many people, epitomise this camouflaging, if you like, of the secret and the sacred. Long Jack Philippus is one of the last surviving members of the painting mob and was involved in the painting of the mural and has been a constant in the Papunya Tula art movement. His work's probably more of the classic style that has been the sort of the mainstay of Papunya Tula painting over the years.
Am mai multe. Să las și la ambasadă.
N-ai înțeles, copia, mă! Went out to the airstrip, which was a clearing of hundreds of meters, both long and wide.
Așa ceva n-a văzut Parisul. Fac copii și mâine.
Training boleh nak jual jalpai, kan? Don pampu menjat men je nak brand.
We would go out every afternoon, driving long distances, easily 100 miles after work, looking for kangaroos. And some of the men were very good hunters, some of them weren't.
Why aku ni? Nan ko bayar, no? Sometime man ko bayar. Oh, cara dia bagai macam, pengajian orang berbanyak na bayar macam, Mal logo penyang ko ba. Bondel ba ko niya na katon dito ko ya.
You know, he loved going out hunting with old people, with my dad, Noisbeck, Johnny W., Billy Stockman, Meek Ngamrari, and Turkey Dawson, Johnny Scopey.
I'll look up to me, White Balbalon. Simple. Go. Tom, Tree. I've been given. Okay. Okay, kung yung ngayon niya na ba balog. White Balbalon ba na? Simple yun lang. Pada balon niya na ba? Wakal ba? Dengan katan na balog.
Geoff really enjoyed the company of the painters there, in the sense that he might go to their camp and enjoy talking, even eating, sitting around a fire. They were friends. He also enjoyed, I think, being with people who were as alienated as they were, at least as far as white society is concerned, because he was seeing something that nobody else was seeing. He had a sort of secret little insight into something magic that was actually going on out there that he knew that nobody else had. And I think he did enjoy that, as you might if you made a big discovery, and as yet it was unannounced.
He drove himself, and I think he was living really beyond what he should have been living, but he was driven. Once he saw the ball start rolling, he went along with it, and he sort of lived ahead of himself, but there was no holding him back.
One of the important roles that Geoff Bardon played in the genesis of the Papunya Tula movement was that he was very careful to document or to develop a theory around the works that he saw being made before him, and of course in his books and then later on in his films, building up this sort of literature, if you like, about the paintings was one way of supporting the sale of the paintings in a commercial art world. So I think Geoff was very prescient in realising that.
The painting developed, and it got to the stage where there was a stack of them. Simple, just a stack of them in the room. And another good idea, do you think they're worth any money? Well, we can find out. So got to trot into Alice Springs to the caravan park that had the gallery, come back all sold.
He first sold some of those paintings, and he came back with the money. $20 for a painting, now worth 200,000 or 300,000 or 400,000 US. When he first came back with the money, and he gave that money to the painters, their comment to him was, this is the first time white society has ever placed any value of any kind on anything we've ever done.
When Carpet Championship won a prize for the Celtics Art Award, there was a realisation that the art had a monetary value, and that monetary value might be useful to put towards something else.
Geoff's economic input to the community was obviously going to be a success. It was going to make lots of cash for the economy. Whereas some of the other economic ventures that the NTA administration had gone into were pretty dismal, like the cattle at Housebluff, the fact that fresh meat was brought from Alice Springs abattoirs to Papunya in the middle of the cattle country. Then there was another venture, the Angora goats. Angora goats, I'm not sure whether they were eaten or they just died, but that was another venture that went down the hole.
From September 1971, I brought back large cheques of $1,500 every fortnight. And at first this was distributed amongst the painting men the same way as I'd mark a painting exercise. I would mark each man's work, the value of the painting, 15, 25, 30, you know. So I handed the money over to Fred Friss, and he was very, very good.
I became the treasurer because I had one of the signatures on the account. So that was where the original money went, to be an in and out to the painters and to keep some record.
There was a jubilation. The men would get their cheque and bounce out of the art room and bolt down the stairs. There were those who were very well paid and could hardly wait for tomorrow to get started on some more. And suddenly we were in business.
Geoff and the painters sought to have their organisation incorporated, and of course this raised the issue of what to call the cooperative. And I think it was Charlie Tarawa in the end that came up with the idea of Papunya Tula, which was a reference to the honey ant site at Papunya.
We got a shipment from Papunya Tula of these paintings that were totally different. There was no ochres. They were on artboard, they were on chipboard, they were on tea chest lids. When you looked at those paintings, the symbols and designs just seemed to move, the paintwork seemed to dance. You had the feeling that you had to get hold of the painting to almost stop it from moving and attracting, you know, your eyes to different parts of it. And it was an amazing feeling when we first saw those early ones.
The white people there had no idea as to the merits of the art that was coming forward, that it was a combination of visual and written word. So I photographed everything and had every man photographed professionally. I kept records as best I could, sketches as best I could.
Ok. Eu am o cutie la Embassy cu toate cu din astea.
If he learnt it was a man or a woman sitting, or you could see it was a spear, but that spear represented a man, then he was learning that which everyone in the public arena could learn. There were times when they would tell him things and they would say, that's a dangerous one, and that would mean you left it aside. You didn't record it for the public domain.
With these works that he was seeing in the early days of Papunya, he realised that there was an aerial perspective which has been a hallmark of Papunya Tula painting over the years. And so in much of his writing he was coming to grips with the fact that there was this sort of spiritual perspective and then of course this spatial perspective, a number of different criteria operating in these paintings.
I soon learned to balance out what the Aboriginal men might think, what was sacred, secret, and what I would understand and what I would not understand. And they were overjoyed when I said I didn't understand a lot of it.
Geoff was alluding to in his writing that there's a whole dimension to the paintings that we, Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people, are not the senior law people of these communities, can never know. There's occasional references to events or abilities of people to traverse the landscape in ways that we couldn't possibly contemplate, and I think that that contributes again to the ability of these artists to have this very particular perspective and often quite unique perspective of country that they can bring to these paintings. This is a movement that is incredibly innovative, it's incredibly diverse. Artists have changed and responded to the environment around them through their painting. Through the 80s you get people like Michael Nelson Jackamara. His style becomes very distinctive within the art movement.
When I go to sleep, I dream. And then next morning, I do another style. I've got to use my technique. That's the reason I came to famous. I can see it. I can see it in the front. Oh, next day I'll do this. I just start and just wake up and start doing drawings.
So anyhow, them little circles that I've done it, 2 circles, that represent that honey ants, you know, when they travel from west from Mount Leaving. And the big circles, the main one that I've done, that big circles, we use that Papunya, where they have the big rest there and big ceremony.
Gradually, from little small paintings, gradually got bigger and bigger and really bigger now.
kept me so busy and it disrupted the system of work in the settlement.
You can see that the manager of the community would say, my fellas should be cutting wood, a dot painting with Geoff Bardon. But the firewood wasn't on the verandas when it should have been. It was a drama. And the person to take it out on would have been Geoff.
He created something that was beautiful and grand, but also added an extra pressure.
After I left, it was disconcerting to hear that, and to hear from Geoff that the whole thing had sort of blown up into a mess of conflict.
After Fred went, the fellow who replaced him was a self-righteous amateur. I never actually complained before it was too late.
He became the focus of attention in a sort of a political battle. The government wanted these people really, I think, to disappear. And what he was doing was giving them the strength to continue. And he was totally ill-equipped for that political battle.
Scrisorile astea faine. Să-mi fie numai la mine. Rămâne și în dosară, că totuși.
It became a very, very unnerving situation when men who'd made piers and coolamans in the workshop, my art room, were being harassed by the delinquent whites on the outpost to buy them cheaply. You see, now I said you couldn't do that. You'd have to pay the prices that I put on them because these men were doing beautiful things and people were trying to buy them for $2. And it was argued that I was a troublemaker.
I believe there were unscrupulous dealers and they wouldn't pay the full price to the Aboriginal painters. That hurt us all, that these men who did such good work weren't paid fully. Where the money was pocketed, I don't know. And of course, Geoff, with the sensitive nature that he had, this hurt him deeply, that these people supposedly being raised up and restored were again being stepped on and crushed back into the earth.
I became very worried because what was once the handling of money with sincerity became the handling of money with sleight of hand. The Aboriginal men, when they weren't paid promptly for the hard work that they had put into the assignments, thought I had betrayed them. They thought that somehow the money was not being distributed as promised and that it was my fault.
People came together and worked together like that. And it was like a bit of elastic. It'd go like that out to there's your Aboriginal world and your white world there, and then bang, you let the elastic go and went like this and hit, and it had a tension and energy and vibrancy which at its most positive was fantastic, but also created all these problems that, you know, neither side knew what the heck one another was doing half the time. And Geoff was right in the middle of that. He was part of the elastic getting pulled around.
It was partly the fact that I put a priority on what the men got, and the cheque went out on the Thursday to Papunya with Tim Lura, and they didn't get paid till the following Tuesday, and they were all hungry. They had worked for 6 weeks or longer with no money, and they'd said to me, you know, when are we going to get paid, boss, you know? No more work and we get some fucking money.
The pressure would have got too great. He may not have had a group of friends to fall back on. He thought he did, and when the crunch came, he found he didn't.
I found myself in danger from the white people, particularly those in authority, that did not like any kind of change for the Aboriginal people, that they were supposed to be museum pieces, living museum pieces. There was the innuendo that I'd been drinking too much, and I became very despondent when this kind of person was prepared to denounce me to suit themselves.
I'm not surprised that Geoff felt that he was being attacked, one, because of his sensitive nature, but two, because of the reality of their very bad behaviour, the reality of perhaps jealousy, envy, greed, trying to hog that money or get that money or withhold that money that was rightfully due to the artists.
This is towards the end of the story. This was the part that broke me. So I had to go and lie down. I was very, very ill. Had no one to talk to, and it was very serious because I was being sabotaged. Spent a couple of days lying down, and then I realised I had to go, and I took my valuables, radio, coat, boning knife, and swapped them for paintings, bought some paintings, and I loaded my car up and just drove out of there in a rage. I got so angry that I don't know what the medical doctor called it.
4 valize ca să termin
I was certainly
5% din toată casa. Tu înțelegi? Nu să cred. Termin 5% din toată casa, deci nu cred că a fost 5%. A intrat o reclamă.
Family GP, who had known me as a student, and he referred me to Dr. Harry Bailey of the Chelmsford Clinic, saying that he was an artistic fellow spirit and would help me, which sounded satisfying at the time. 45 people did die as a result of his treatment, and I was just a young man and did recover, but could not hold a proper job and have been an invalid ever since.
I didn't know anything about Aboriginal art until I started working with Geoff on his first book, and that was just before it was going to be published, and I started doing some extra typing for Geoff, and that's the way I learned about the art and got to know Geoff a lot better.
Dawn found me entertaining and a good eater. I used to joke with her. I'd seen a good movie where one of the hillbilly cowboys kept saying, "You cooking and me eating, we'd be as happy as two little doggies at a waterhole." This is 2003, March 2003, and I've just had gallbladder surgery for malignant cancer, malignant tumour, and it's knocked me. This is the 3rd month now, and I'm only just getting some strength back. The tumour is cancerous, and they didn't get it all. There is a chance of recovery, and I hope that I do find a continued life, that I I'm very fortunate with what's happened. I have no regrets.
Și niște payments-uri din astea pentru viitor. 2368. Și 9.000. Ăștia nu i-am mai recuperat niciodată. 10.000 de lei. Să iau și eu.
And all over the world, people come here to visit this place. Because this place is famous. There because of Geoff Bardon and the modern artists. So,
I think, as Geoff Bardon said in his own humble way, he was the right man at the right place at the right time, and I think certainly that's true. But I think that Geoff was a visionary at great personal cost to himself, but nonetheless he kept working, on his books and on his films. He'd been such a champion, if you like, for the artists and their work over the years.
A visitor to me said that you can see Papunya in a minute. There's nothing there. And yet it's now known, in irony, that there's the treasures of Aladdin's cave.
Cred că e gata. E gata, domnul Dan. De căcatele aici. Zi tu ce să fac eu cu ele, nu să le arunc pe toate mai așa. Dulcestea? Adică dacă statul și...
New South Wales faces what's been described as a critical time over the next 3 to 4 weeks after health authorities confirmed 17 new coronavirus infections today. The state's Premier has urged residents to get themselves tested, even with mild symptoms.
New South Wales, given the circumstances, is holding the line and doing okay, but we are still on high alert. Dr. Chant and I said a couple of weeks ago that the
Deci, practic, Dane,
Da.
când încărcăm containerul, vine acasă, nu mergem cu toate bagajele la masă, e evităm. Aici avem mai multe. Asta înseamnă că treptat trebuie să iau și din colecție și... Ți-am mai găsit niște... și o